Brittney Kade was 22 years old, and her life was a performance in a play she hadn't written. She lived in a cramped, shared apartment in a rundown neighborhood of Philadelphia, where the constant soundtrack was the wail of distant sirens and the arguing of neighbors through paper-thin walls. Her annual income, painstakingly earned through double shifts at a call center and the occasional soul-crushing gig as a promo model for energy drinks at sporting events, barely scraped past $22,000. It was a sum that felt less like a living wage and more like a slow, financial bleeding out. Every dollar was spoken for, a chunk for rent, a larger, more painful chunk for the hormones that were her lifeline, and the meager remainder for food and the bus pass that ferried her between her two equally depressing jobs. From the outside, to the strangers who catcalled her on the street or the impatient callers who screamed at her over the phone, Brittney was a stunning, statuesque woman. She stood 6'2" in flats, with legs that seemed to go on for miles, a cascade of jet black hair that fell in soft waves around her shoulders, and a face with sharp, elegant cheekbones and full, pouty lips. But in the privacy of her small room, with its peeling IKEA furniture and the single, full-length mirror that never lied, she saw the ghost of the person she'd been assigned at birth. She saw the subtle tells, the broadness of her shoulders, the Adam's apple she carefully hid with scarves and high collars. She was a masterpiece of her own creation, a daily, painstakingly constructed work of art. But the world only ever saw the finished painting, never the desperate, trembling artist holding the brush. The call center was her own personal purgatory. It was a vast, fluorescent-lit room that hummed with the low-grade misery of 100 people forced to be polite in the face of unimaginable rudeness. Her name tag read Brittney, but over the headset, her voice, still deeper than that of cisgender women, often caused confusion, leading to calls of sir or mate, which felt like 1,000 tiny paper cuts to her soul. Her supervisor, a man named Keith whose breath always smelled of stale coffee and contempt, had a particular knack for this. "Hey man," he'd say, clapping her on the shoulder with a force that was just a little too hard, "those numbers are looking a little soft. You gotta close harder out there." That's when she heard them. Two of her female coworkers were at the sinks, their voices echoing in the small space. "Did you hear that guy on her line?" One said, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. "Absolutely brutal." "Yeah, well, what do you expect?" The other replied, her tone laced with a casual cruelty that was worse than the caller's rage. "I mean, it's not exactly a surprise, is it? He probably figured it out. It's just a confusing." The word confusing hung in the air, toxic and suffocating. It was the story of her life. A confusing body. A confusing voice. A confusing existence that didn't fit into anyone's neat little boxes. She didn't cry. A cold, hard clarity settled over her. This was it. This was the soundtrack to the rest of her life if she didn't do something, anything, to change the station. That night, in the sanctuary of her room, she opened her laptop. It was her portal to a world where she could be herself. In online forums and chat rooms for trans women, she found community, support, and also whispers of another world. A world where girls like her weren't confusing. They were worshipped. She ventured, her heart pounding, into the corners of the internet where adult content was created by and for people who saw women like her not as novelties or fetishes, but as ideals of beauty and power. She saw performers tall, confident, breathtakingly beautiful trans women who owned their bodies with a ferocity she could only dream of. They weren't hiding. They were celebrating. And the comments sections weren't filled with hate. They were filled with adoration. They were called goddesses, queens, and the money they reportedly earned. It was a number so far removed from her reality it might as well have been from another galaxy. A wild, terrifying idea began to form. It started as a fantasy, a secret rebellion against the Keiths of the world. But with each passing day of drudgery at the call center, the fantasy solidified into a plan. It was insane. It was risky. It would invite a level of scrutiny and potential hatred she could scarcely imagine. But the alternative, a lifetime of being confusing, of being misgendered, of financial desperation, was a far more terrifying prospect. The photos and the short scene she filmed were released a month later. Brittney didn't tell a soul. She quit her job at the call center the day the payment cleared, offering no notice to Keith. She simply never went back. The initial impact was contained within the niche world of adult entertainment, but it was seismic. Who was this new girl? She wasn't just beautiful. She had an aura, or regal intensity that was completely unique. Her fanbase grew overnight. The money started to flow, first in a stream, then in a river. She moved out of the shared apartment and into a bright, airy one-bedroom with a view of the Philadelphia skyline. For the first time, she wasn't just surviving. She was thriving, but fame, even niche fame, is a double-edged sword. As her star rose, the whispers started. The first hateful comment on a public forum felt like a punch to the gut. Then came the messages, the threats. Someone from her past, an old friend from before her transition, recognized her and outed her to a gossip blog. The article was vile, dead-naming her and painting her as a grotesque spectacle. The shame and fear she thought she'd left behind came flooding back, a tidal wave threatening to drown her new life. The first part of her journey had been about creation. The second part, she realized with a sinking heart, would be about survival. She had built her castle in the sky, and now the armies were gathering at the gates, determined to tear it down. The siege began not with a single, catastrophic event, but with a daily, grinding assault. The hate mail was a constant drip of poison in her inbox. The blog article had opened the floodgates, and now the world felt entitled to an opinion on her body, her identity, her very right to exist. Men who claimed to be her biggest fans online would, in the next breath, send her the most degrading, violent fantasies. The mainstream media, if they noticed her at all, did so with a tone of lurid fascination, reducing her complex journey to a sensationalist headline. She was a transgender adult star. A label that felt both reductive and dangerously exposing. The money was better than ever. Her annual income was now well into the high six figures, but it felt like blood money, earned by offering up the most intimate parts of herself for the world to mock and desire in equal measure. She bought a sleek new car and filled her apartment with beautiful things, but they were just decorations in a gilded cage. She became a prisoner of her own success. She was afraid to go out alone, paranoid that everyone recognized her, that every whisper was about her. The confident goddess from the photo shoots would come home, strip off her makeup, and lie in the dark. The silence ringing with the echoes of online hatred. Her family, whom she had cautiously come out 2 years before and who had offered a fragile, strained acceptance, now completely cut her off. Her mother's final email was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive grief. "We prayed for you to find happiness, Brittney, but this public shame. We cannot be a part of this. Don't contact us." It was the deepest cut of all. She had traded the conditional love of her family for the fickle adoration of strangers. And in her darkest moments, she wondered if it was a bargain with the devil. Her savior, ironically, was the very community she had found online. Other performers, veterans of this war, reached out. They offered advice, support, and a brutal, unvarnished truth. They taught her how to block, to ignore, to build emotional armor. Her manager, a fierce, no-nonsense trans woman named Anya who had been through it all 2 decades prior, sat her down. "They are trying to erase you, Brittney," Anya said, her voice like gravel. "They want you to be ashamed. They want you to be a victim. So your only option is to be prouder, louder, and more successful than they can possibly imagine. You have to become a fortress." The ultimate test of her newfound strength came when a conservative media outlet, known for its anti-trans rhetoric, invited her to debate one of their most prominent commentators on a live-streamed show. Anya advised against it. "It's a trap, Brittney. They just want to use you as a punching bag." But Brittney saw it differently. It was a battlefield, and she was ready to fight. The night of the debate, she walked onto the set, a vision of power and poise in a sharp, crimson pantsuit. The host, smirking man with a patronizing tone, immediately launched into his well-rehearsed attacks, talking about biology, protecting women's spaces, and the danger of the transgender ideology. The story ends 2 years later. Brittney Kade is 24. She is standing backstage at a major LGBTQ rights gala in New York, about to accept a humanitarian award. She wears a stunning, custom-made gown, and her head is held high. Her annual income is now a multifaceted empire generating millions, but her wealth is measured not in dollars, but in the impact she has. She looks at her reflection in a backstage monitor. She no longer sees the ghost of her past or the confusing girl from Philadelphia. She sees a woman, a leader, a survivor. As she walks onto the stage to a thunderous standing ovation, she smiles.